Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the course of Survey of Major English-Speaking Countries. Today, we are going to learn Chapter 6, The Literature of Great Britain. This lecture is about Lesson D, the 19th century realism in British literature. It was in the Victorian era that the novel became the leading literary work in English. Another important fact is the number of women novelists who were successful in the 19th century, even though they often had to use a masculine pseudonym. At the beginning of the 19th century, most novels were published in 3 volumes. However, monthly serialization was revived with the publication demand was high for each episode to introduce some new element, whether it was a plot twist or a new character, so as to maintain the reader's interest. Both Charles Dickens and William Thackeray frequently published this way. The first half of the 19th century saw the rise of social novel, also known as social problem novel, that arose out of the social and political upheavals. This was in many ways a reaction to rapid industrialization and the social, political, and economic issues associated with it, and was a means of answering to the abuses of government and industry and the suffering of the poor, who were not profiting from England's economic prosperity and urbanization. Stories of the working class poor were directed toward middle class to help create sympathy and promote change. An early example is Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Born in 1812, Charles Dickens emerged from a turbulent period in English culture. Before the novelist, it was the poem age called Romanticism. An important point about Romanticism is that it is defined by its poets, including William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, George Gordon Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and John Keats. Romanticism is a reaction against what came before, the period of the Enlightenment and reason. Romanticism is all about emotion and feeling as opposed to thought, nature over civilization. Charles Dickens has a complicated relation to Romanticism. William Wordsworth, the great poet of Romanticism, famously said that poetry comes from the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Charles Dickens, hardly influenced by the Romanticism and resist the moralistic impulses and theoretical implications. Unlike the Romantic writer whose concern was the single self, Charles Dickens concerned about the relation between oneself and another, the self and the society. Charles Dickens used his novels not only to advance his career, but also to get us interested in some pretty serious things. The evils of an industrializing society, the working conditions in factories, child labor, vicious social snobbery, the rise of government bureaucracy. Great storytellers can make us care, and few writers have made readers care more than Charles Dickens. Dickens wrote vividly about London life and struggles of the poor, but in a good-humored fashion, accessible to readers of all classes. One of his most popular works to this day is A Christmas Carol, published in 1843. In more recent years, Dickens has been most admired for his later novels such as Downby and Son, Great Expectations, Bleak House, and Little Dorrit and Our Mutual Friend. Charles Dickens was concerned with the state of the nation, and having suffered as a child worker himself when his father was imprisoned for debts, he had personal reasons for bringing the sufferings of the poor to light. He wrote many well-known novels, including Oliver Twist, the story of an orphan child drawn into crimes in the London underworld, David Copperfield, his own favorite book, and Great Expectations, which traces the growth of Philip Pip from a boy of shallow dreams to a man of depth and character. His works enjoyed unprecedented popularity during his lifetime, and by the 20th century, critics and scholars had recognized him as a literary genius. His novels and short stories are still widely read today. Jane Austen wrote 6 novels published between 1811 and 1818. These stories of middle-class women in search of husbands are known for their fine writing, subtle characterization, and controlled studies of manners. The novel of manners pictures in detail of the customs and thoughts of a certain social class. Jane Austen, who is so genius in this form of writing, is indeed one of the greatest of all English novelists. A delightful, almost flawless stylist, she has devoted admirations of her sense and sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and Emma, among other works. In the spirit of the 18th century, rationality is praised, but in the contemporary spirit of Romanticism, this is balanced with imaginative and the personal. This balance is seen in the title of Sense and Sensibility, which was made into a highly successful film by a Taiwan director, Ann Lee. You should watch it in your spare time. Jane Austen's stories often explore the dependence of women on marriage in the pursuit of favorable social standing and economic security. Her use of biting irony, along with her realism, humor, and social commentary, have long earned her reputation among critics, scholars, and popular audiences alike. Perhaps the most famous literary family in the British history are the Bronte Sisters, and they too were influenced by the Romantic movement. They were 3 daughters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne, of the vicar of a village church in Yorkshire. They were poor, but educated and respectable. They had a brother who was a failed painter and alcoholic, and other sisters who died in childhood. All the sisters were tragically to die before their father. Given their short lives, they did not produce much, but among their works are some of the best-loved novels in English, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights being the most successful. Both have been produced in films and TV dozens of times. Their novels reflect both their local geography, the wide high moors of the local hills, with their home backed onto, and their uncertain economic position, because of which they could not hope for a respectable marriage of equals, being too poor. Thus, Jane Eyre tells the story of an orphan who has loveless childhood at a terrible boarding school and who goes to work for a rich man as a governess to his child. he becomes attracted to her because of her independence and free spirit. However, he has a secret in his past, a mad former wife locked up in the attic of his house. The secret discovered, Jane runs away. Later, she becomes the object of a vicar's attention, who wishes to marry her as he feels she will make a suitable wife for a missionary. But in true romantic fashion, this worthy but passionless lover is rejected, and Jane returns to the darker but passionately romantic figure of her previous employer, Mr. Rochester. The Bronte sisters had troubles getting published, and in fact had to use male pseudonyms in order to gain acceptance. But one of Charlotte's friends was another female novelist, Elizabeth Gaskell. She represents a more realistic aspect of the 19th century novel, concerned with social comments, not just personal freedom. A vicar's daughter from Manchester, she was concerned with the situation of the workers in the new industrial cities. Her novel North and South describes the division that this economic change was emphasizing in Britain's society at that time, both in terms of class and geography. The North was the industrial part of England, and those in the South, where power lay, remained ignorant of it. She was supported in her work by the greatest British storyteller, Charles Dickens. An early rival to Dickens was William Makepeace Thackeray, who during the Victorian period ranked second only to him. But he is now much less read and is known almost exclusively for his Vanity Fair, published in 1847. In that novel, he satirizes the whole humanity while retaining a light touch. It features his most memorable character, Becky Sharp. She is the leading person in the story and is perhaps the most memorable character Thackeray created. Subtitled A Novel Without a Hero, this novel is deliberately anti-heroic. Thackeray states that in this novel, his object is to indicate that we are, for the most part, foolish and selfish people, all eager after vanities. The rich movement and color of the early 19th century society make Vanity Fair Thackeray's greatest achievement. The narrative skill, subtle characterization, and descriptive power make it one of the outstanding novels of its period. But Vanity Fair is more than a portrayal and imaginative analysis of a particular society. From the story, we are made aware of the ambivalence of human motives. It is the tragic irony that makes Vanity Fair a lasting and insightful evaluation of human ambition and experience. So much for today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.